Captain Jake Morrison walked through the massive crystal hallways of the Galactic Council, building on Nexus Prime. His boots made soft clicking sounds on the smooth floor as he moved toward the main chamber. The walls around him glowed with a soft blue light that came from somewhere deep inside the crystal structure. Other species moved past him in the corridors, their different shapes and sizes making the hallway look like a strange parade of alien life. Jake had been humanity's representative to the Council for 3 years now. He had seen many debates and votes in that time, but today felt different. Today, the Council would vote on Resolution 2847, a piece of legislation that would change everything for humanity. The resolution would strip humans of their mining rights in the Outer Rim territories, limit their trade routes to only the most basic shipping lanes, and ban human military vessels from entering 17 key star systems. The chamber doors opened in front of him with a soft hiss. Jake stepped inside and looked up at the massive dome overhead. Thousands of seats filled the circular room, each one designed for a different alien species. Some seats were pools of water for the aquatic races, others were heated platforms for the cold-blooded species, and some were simply empty space for the energy beings that floated above the floor. Jake made his way to the human section, a small area with just 5 seats near the back of the chamber. It was a reminder of how little humanity mattered in galactic politics. The Zephyrian Empire had over 200 seats. The Altarian Trade Federation had 300. Even the Peaceful Centauri Collective had more than 50 seats. Humanity, despite being one of the most innovative and hard-working species in the galaxy, had been given just 5. The Speaker of the Council, a tall Zephyrian with multiple eyes and flowing tentacles instead of arms, called the session to order. Its voice echoed through the chamber with a strange musical quality that all Zephyrians possessed when they spoke. We gather today to vote on Resolution 2847, which addresses the concerning expansion of human activities throughout Council space. The Speaker announced. The motion has been seconded by 47 member species and requires a simple majority to pass. Jake felt his stomach tighten as he heard those words. 47 species wanted to limit humanity's growth and freedom. It was not a surprise, but it still hurt to hear it spoken out loud. The debate began with Ambassador Veltar of the Centauri Collective taking the floor. The tall, gray-skinned alien stood at the center podium and began to speak in its calm, measured tone. Honorable members of the Council, humanity has shown a pattern of aggressive expansion that threatens the delicate balance we have maintained for centuries, Veltar said. They establish colonies without proper consultation. They mine resources at unsustainable rates, and their military presence in disputed territories has created tension with established civilizations. Jake wanted to stand up and argue, but he knew the rules. Each species got one chance to speak, and humanity would have to wait their turn. He listened as speaker after speaker stood up to criticize human actions throughout the galaxy. The Rigelian delegate complained about human mining, operations that were too efficient and made Rigelian miners look bad. The Vegan Trade Consortium representative argued that human shipping companies were taking too much business from established alien firms. Even the usually neutral Tausetians voiced concerns about human agricultural techniques that produced higher crop yields than their traditional methods. What frustrated Jake the most was that every complaint seemed to boil down to the same thing: humans were too good at what they did. They worked harder, innovated faster, and solved problems better than the other species. Instead of trying to learn from humanity or compete fairly, the Council wanted to simply hold humans back. When Jake's turn finally came to speak, he walked to the center podium with a heavy heart. He looked around the chamber at thousands of alien faces, most of them already decided against humanity, but he had to try. Honorable delegates, Jake began. Humanity has always been a loyal member of this Council. We have shared our technology freely, defended Council worlds from pirates and invaders, and contributed more to galactic peace and prosperity than any other species of our size. A few murmurs rippled through the chamber, but Jake continued. The mining operations you call excessive have fed hungry populations on dozens of worlds. The shipping routes you want to restrict have brought medicine and supplies to remote colonies during emergencies. The military vessels you fear have saved countless lives by responding to distress calls when other species could not or would. Not help? Jake paused and looked directly at the speaker. If you pass this resolution, you will not be limiting human expansion. You will be punishing humanity for being successful, for working hard, and for caring about the welfare of all council. Citizens, not just our own. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then the Andromedan delegate stood up and spoke in its cold, electronic voice. Humanity's emotional appeals do not change the facts. They have grown too powerful too quickly. This resolution is necessary to maintain order. The vote began immediately after the debate ended. Jake watched as the numbers appeared on the massive display screen above the chamber. Green lights represented votes in favor of the resolution, red lights represented votes against it. As the tally continued, Jake's heart sank deeper and deeper. The final count appeared on the screen. 847 votes in favor, 1 vote against. Humanity stood alone. The motion passes, the speaker announced with what seemed like satisfaction in its musical voice. Resolution 2847 is hereby enacted. Human mining rights in the Outer Rim are revoked. Human trade routes are restricted to designated lanes only, and human military vessels are banned from entering the 17 systems listed in the appendix. Jake stood up slowly. He reached into his pocket and activated a small recording device that had been running throughout the entire session. Every word, every vote, every moment of this betrayal was now documented for the people back on Earth to hear. Then humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. Effective immediately, Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. The silence that followed was complete. Not a single alien moved or spoke. They had expected humanity to accept the restrictions, to bow their heads and continue serving the galaxy, while being treated as second-class citizens. Jake turned and walked toward the exit. As he reached the doors, he heard the speaker call out behind him, "Captain Morrison, surely you do not mean that. Humanity needs the Council." Jake stopped and turned back to face the chamber full of aliens who had just voted to crush human dreams. "And ambitions? No," he said quietly. "The Council needs humanity. You just forgot that fact." The doors closed behind him with a soft hiss, and Jake Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council building for the last time. Within hours, the message would reach every human world, every human ship, and every human citizen scattered across the galaxy. Humanity was going home. Admiral Lisa Parker stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, humanity's largest battleship, as the emergency transmission from Captain Morrison reached her command center. The message was short and clear, but its meaning would change everything. For the human race scattered across the galaxy, all human vessels and personnel are hereby ordered to withdraw from Council space immediately. Morrison's voice crackled through the speakers. Humanity has formally left the Galactic Council. Operation Homecoming begins now. Lisa had been expecting this moment for months. She had watched the votes in the council chambers, seen how the other species treated human representatives, and heard the complaints about human success that masked jealousy and fear. The writing had been on the wall, and she had prepared accordingly. "Commander Taylor, send the recall signal to all human ships and stations," she ordered her first officer. Rick Taylor nodded and moved to his communication console, his fingers dancing across the control panels with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, the message went out across subspace to every corner of the galaxy. Human colonies that had existed for generations received the same simple instruction: pack up and come home. Human engineers working on alien space stations were told to gather their belongings and report to the nearest human vessel. Human doctors, treating patients in council hospitals, were ordered to finish their current cases and leave immediately. The response was swift and coordinated. Humanity had learned long ago to stick together when times got tough, and this was the toughest situation they had faced in centuries. Transport ships changed course toward human space. Cargo vessels dumped their loads at the nearest council ports. and military units began their withdrawal from forward positions. Dr. Susan Wells was in the middle of performing surgery on a Rigelian patient when the message reached the medical station where she worked. The blue-skinned alien lay unconscious on the operating table while Susan carefully repaired damage to its internal organs. The procedure was delicate and required the kind of precision that only human doctors seemed to possess. "Dr. Wells, we need to go," her assistant, Nurse Kate Roberts, whispered urgently. "The transport leaves in 2 hours." Susan looked down at her patient and then at the other human medical staff in the room. "We finish this surgery first. I won't leave a patient to die, even if their government just stabbed us in the back." 3 hours later, Susan walked aboard the human transport ship with her medical team. Behind her, the alien doctors were already struggling with the advanced equipment she had designed and installed. The medical bay that could treat 17 different species simultaneously would probably never work the same way again. On the industrial world of Gamma Hydri, Chief Engineer Danny Cooper was facing a similar situation. The massive mining operation he had designed and managed for 8 years was too complex for the local Rigelian workers to handle alone. The extraction systems required constant adjustment, the refining processes needed daily calibration, and the safety protocols demanded someone who understood both human engineering and alien biology. "You cannot simply leave," the Rigelian supervisor pleaded as Danny packed his tools. "We do not understand how the systems work without human supervision." Danny stopped packing and looked at the alien with a mixture of pity and frustration. "You've had 8 years to learn. Every time I tried to teach your people, they said human methods were too complicated. Now you want me to stay and keep fixing everything for free while my own species gets kicked around by the council." The Rigelian's face turned a darker shade of blue, which Danny knew meant it was becoming desperate. "We can offer you triple salary, your own living quarters, full authority over operations." "Not interested," Danny replied. "I'm going home." As Danny's shuttle lifted off from Gamma Hydri, he could see through the viewport that the mining operation had already shut down. Without human oversight, the Rigelian workers were afraid to operate the complex machinery. The planet that had produced rare minerals for dozens of worlds would soon go dark. The financial markets were the first to show signs of real panic. On the trading floors of New Geneva Station, Altarian merchants watched in horror as the economic systems that humans had designed and maintained for 2 centuries began to malfunction. Currency exchange rates fluctuated wildly. Trade agreements that required human verification became worthless, and the complex algorithms that prevented market crashes started spitting out error messages. Trader Zix of the Altarian Trade Federation tried desperately to contact his human business partners, but received only automated responses. The humans who had managed his investment portfolio for 30 years were gone, leaving him with billions of credits tied up in transactions he could not complete. At the Kepler Junction trade station, the situation was even worse. The massive facility that served as a hub for commerce between 12 different star systems had been designed and built entirely by human engineers. Every system, every protocol, every safety measure bore the mark of human innovation. Station manager Velkar of the Centauri Collective stood in the central command center, staring at displays that showed cascading system failures throughout the facility. Life support was failing in sections of the station, cargo bay doors were malfunctioning, and the computer systems that tracked millions of transactions per day were crashing one by one. "Get me the human technical team," Velkar ordered his assistant. "Sir, they left on the last transport 6 hours ago," came the reply. Velkar felt his foreheart skip a beat. The station serviced trade routes that supplied food and medicine to hundreds of worlds. If it shut down completely, entire populations could face starvation. "Contact the human government," he said desperately. "Offer them anything they want. To send a repair team." His assistant tried for several minutes before reporting back with a message that would become familiar. "Across the galaxy, humanity is no longer affiliated with the Galactic Council. Please direct all inquiries to your local council representative." President Helen Clark sat in her office on Earth, reading report after report of the exodus taking place across the galaxy. Her desk was covered with data tablets showing the locations of human ships, the status of evacuation operations, and the first signs of chaos beginning to appear in Council space. "How many people are we bringing home?" she asked her chief of staff, Robert Kim. "Current estimates show nearly 50 million humans scattered across Council territory," Robert replied. "The transport operation is the largest in human history, but it's going smoothly. Our people are eager to come home." Helen nodded and picked up another report, this one from the Intelligence Division. It showed the first economic disruptions in Council space, the failure of human-designed systems, and the desperate attempts by alien governments to maintain services that they had never learned to manage themselves. "They thought we were replaceable," she said quietly. "They thought any species could do what humans do, that we were just another set of workers they could control and exploit." Robert looked out the window at the busy spaceport below, where transport after transport was arriving with human refugees from across the galaxy. "I guess they're about to find out how wrong they were." As the first week of the exodus continued, the reports from Council space grew more alarming. 3 minor wars had broken out between species arguing over who should manage the abandoned human facilities. The Galactic Defense Network had lost contact with 47 monitoring stations. Medical facilities were operating at reduced capacity, and several planets had declared states of emergency as their infrastructure began to fail. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the difference between having humans around and actually understanding what humans did. For centuries, they had taken human competence for granted, never bothering to learn the skills that kept their civilization running smoothly. Now humanity was gone, and the real consequences were just beginning to unfold. 2 months after humanity's departure from the Galactic Council, the galaxy was beginning to understand the true scale of what they had lost. Commander Amy Foster stood on the observation deck of the human transport vessel New Horizon, watching the stars stream past as they traveled toward Earth. Her communication console buzzed constantly with emergency transmissions from across Council space, desperate pleas for help that would go unanswered. Another distress call from the vegan system. Her communications officer, Lieutenant Ben Carter, reported, "Their manufacturing plants have shut down completely. They're requesting immediate technical assistance." Amy shook her head without looking. "Away from the stars. Standard response, Lieutenant. Refer them to their council representative." The irony was not lost on her. For decades, human ships had been the first to respond to any emergency in Council space. Human engineers fixed broken systems, human doctors treated alien diseases, and human soldiers protected worlds that could not defend themselves. Now those same worlds were discovering what life was like without human help. On the industrial world of Arcturus 7, the situation had gone from bad to catastrophic. The massive factories that produced starship components for half the galaxy had been operating at reduced capacity since the human supervisors left. The Andromedan workers who remained had tried their best to maintain production, but they simply did not understand the complex processes that humans had developed over generations. Factory Supervisor Krell 9 stood in the main production facility, watching sparks fly from a malfunctioning assembly line. The machine that shaped hull plates for Council warships had been running perfectly for 15 years under human management. Now it was producing defective parts that would never pass safety inspections. "Can we repair it?" Krell 9 asked the maintenance team. "We do not have the technical specifications," came the reply. The human engineer who designed this process took all the documentation with him when he left. The same scene was playing out across the galaxy. Human-designed equipment was failing and nobody knew how to fix it. The aliens who had dismissed human engineering as crude but effective were learning that crude or not, human systems worked better than anything they could build themselves. Dr. Angela Ross, formerly the head of medical research at the Council's largest hospital, received her 15th job offer of the week as her transport ship continued toward Earth. This one came from the Taotian government, offering her an entire research facility and unlimited funding if she would return to treat a plague that was spreading through their outer colonies. "They're offering me anything I want," she told her colleague, Dr. Paul Martinez, who was reviewing similar offers on his own tablet. "My own planet, a fleet of research ships, 1 billion credits per year," Paul laughed bitterly. "Last month, said human medical practices were too aggressive and dangerous. They wanted us to use only approved treatments that had been tested for decades. Now they're begging us to come back and save them with our aggressive medicine. The plague that was killing Tausetians was actually a simple bacterial infection that human antibiotics could cure in days. But the careful, methodical approach that Tausetian doctors preferred meant that they would need years to develop and test a treatment. By then, millions would be dead." Angela looked at the message again, and then deleted it. "Let them solve it themselves. Maybe next time they'll think twice before telling us our methods are too dangerous." The Galactic Defense Network was experiencing failures that went far beyond simple equipment breakdowns. Captain Steve Williams, who had been the chief coordinator for humanity's section of the network, watched from his evacuation transport as warning lights blinked red across his personal monitoring system. The network that protected the galaxy from unknown threats was falling apart piece by piece. "Sir, we're receiving automated alerts from 17 monitoring stations," his technical specialist, Sergeant Lisa Shang, reported. "They're showing unknown contacts in sectors 7 through 12. Steve studied the readouts with growing concern. The signatures looked like nothing he had seen before, and the pattern suggested a large fleet moving through space that should have been empty. Under normal circumstances, he would have coordinated with Council forces to investigate the contacts. But humanity was no longer part of the Council, and the alien officers who had taken over his duties did not know how to interpret the complex data. "Are you going to report this to Council authorities?" Lisa asked as Steve hesitated. His training told him to protect all intelligent life, regardless of politics. But his orders were clear. Humanity was no longer responsible for galactic security. No, they wanted to handle things themselves. Let them handle this. On the agricultural world of New Series, the food crisis was reaching emergency levels. The automated farming systems that fed billions across the galaxy had been designed by human agricultural engineers who understood both alien biology and optimal growing conditions. Without proper maintenance and calibration, the systems were producing crops that were either toxic to certain species or lacking in essential nutrients. Agricultural coordinator Fender of the Rigelian Farming Collective stood in a field of withered grain, trying to understand why the crops that had grown perfectly for 20 years were now dying. The human-designed irrigation system was still running. The soil analysis showed proper mineral content, and the weather had been ideal. But something was wrong. "The pH levels are incorrect," his assistant reported after running tests on the soil. "The automatic adjustment system is not working properly." Fender knew that the human engineer who had designed the system could fix the problem in hours. But that engineer was now halfway to Earth, and the technical manuals were written in a combination of human languages and mathematical formulas that no Rigelian could fully understand. Similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of agricultural worlds. The complex systems that maintained optimal growing conditions for different species were failing, and the aliens who had relied on them for generations had never learned how they actually worked. President Helen Clark sat in her office on Earth, reading intelligence reports that painted a picture of escalating chaos across Council space. Her advisors had compiled data showing economic collapse, infrastructure failures, and the beginning of political instability as member species began blaming each other for the crisis. "The Centauri Collective is threatening to withdraw from the Council unless their technical problems are solved immediately," her intelligence chief, Director Mike Patterson, reported. "The Altarian Trade Federation has stopped all commerce with species that voted for Resolution 2847. 3 minor wars have broken out over control of abandoned human facilities." Helen nodded grimly. This was exactly what she had predicted would happen when the Council decided to push humanity out. The galaxy had become dependent on human skills and innovation, but they had never bothered to learn those skills themselves. They had treated humans as useful servants rather than equal partners, and now they were paying the price. "Any word from the council leadership?" she asked. "Speaker Zephes has sent several messages requesting temporary technical assistance while they transition to new systems," Director Patterson replied. "They're not asking for humanity to return to the council, just for us to fix their problems." Helen smiled coldly. "Send the standard response. Humanity is no longer affiliated with the Galactic Council. They can direct their requests to their local council representative." The reports kept coming in, each one showing more evidence of the galaxy's dependence on human expertise. Medical facilities operating at half capacity, manufacturing plants producing defective goods, space stations losing life support, and defense networks going dark. The species that had voted to restrict human expansion were learning that they had just voted to cripple their own civilization. As the third month of humanity's exodus began, the first refugee ships from Council space started appearing at the borders of human territory. Alien civilians who had lost their jobs when human-managed facilities shut down, alien students who had been studying at human universities, and alien patients who needed medical treatments that only human doctors could provide. But the orders from Earth were clear: no alien would be allowed into human space until the Council formally apologized for Resolution 2847 and restored all human rights and privileges. The galaxy had made its choice, and now it would have to live with the consequences. The fourth month after humanity's departure brought a crisis that changed everything. Deep in the galactic core, an ancient automated defense system that had slept for millions of years suddenly awakened. The system had been left behind by a species so old that even their name was forgotten, and for countless generations it had remained dormant and harmless. Fleet Admiral Tony Garcia was aboard the human evacuation vessel Endeavour when the first reports reached him. His communications officer, Lieutenant Kelly Brooks, handed him a data tablet with trembling hands. "Sir, we're receiving distress calls from the core sectors," she said. "Something is attacking Council fleets near the Centauri trade routes." Tony studied the fragmented reports with growing alarm. The descriptions were confused and contradictory, but the pattern was clear. Ships were being destroyed by weapons that seemed to come from nowhere. Energy beams that could slice through the heaviest armor were firing from empty space, and any vessel that tried to approach the source was immediately destroyed. "Do we know what's causing it?" Tony asked. Kelly shook her head. "The Council forces are too busy running to do proper scans. But our long-range sensors are picking up massive energy readings from coordinates that should be empty space." Tony had a sinking feeling in his stomach. He had seen reports of similar energy signatures in classified human intelligence files, references to ancient automated systems that had been discovered and carefully contained over the years. The containment protocols had all been developed and maintained by human technicians who understood the delicate balance needed to keep such systems dormant. "Get me Captain Morrison on a secure channel," Tony ordered, "and pull all our ships back from the core sectors immediately." Captain Jake Morrison was still aboard his diplomatic transport, traveling slowly toward Earth while monitoring the chaos unfolding behind him. When Tony's message reached him, Jake felt his heart sink. He had hoped that the Council's punishment would be limited to economic and social problems, but this was something far more dangerous. The keepers of the ancient sites always warned that these systems could reactivate if not properly maintained, Jake told Tony during their encrypted conversation. Every humans and archaeologist and defense specialist knew about the containment protocols. We've been keeping those things quiet for over a century. "Did we ever share the protocols with Council forces?" Tony asked. "We tried," Jake replied bitterly. "But they said human methods were too aggressive and dangerous. They wanted to study the systems using their own careful, methodical approaches. We kept maintaining the containment fields ourselves because we knew what would happen if they failed." The ancient defense system was not just attacking randomly. It was following programming that had been written by beings whose understanding of warfare went far beyond anything the current galaxy could imagine. The system identified any technological signature as a potential threat and responded with overwhelming force. It had been designed to protect something that no longer existed, but it did not care about such details. Council Admiral Vexthara of the Andromedan Defense Force led the first organized attempt to investigate the attacks. Her fleet of 12 heavy cruisers approached the coordinates where the energy readings were strongest, confident that their advanced shields and weapons could handle whatever they might encounter. They were wrong. The ancient system detected their approach when they were still 3 light minutes away. Energy beams that bent space itself struck the lead cruiser before the crew even knew they were under attack. The ship simply vanished, torn apart at the molecular level by weapons that treated matter as a suggestion rather than a law. Fall back. Immediately, Vexthara ordered her remaining ships, but it was too late. The system had locked onto their energy signatures and was tracking them no matter where they went. One by one, her cruisers were destroyed by beams that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Only 2 ships escaped to report what they had seen, and their reports sent waves of panic through council space. The ancient system was not just defending a single location. It was expanding its perimeter, claiming more and more space around the galactic core and threatening to cut off the major trade routes that connected the galaxy's most important worlds. Dr. Angela Ross was still aboard her transport ship when she received the most tempting offer yet. The message came directly from the council speaker, transmitted through channels that should have been impossible for aliens to access. Dr. Ross, you are the galaxy's leading expert on ancient alien technology, the message began. We know you have successfully interfaced with similar systems in the past. The current crisis threatens billions of lives, and you are perhaps the only being in the galaxy who might be able to resolve it. Angela had indeed worked with ancient systems before. She had spent 15 years studying the artifacts and automated defenses left behind by long-dead civilizations. She understood their logic patterns, their defensive protocols, and most importantly, how to communicate with them safely. It was dangerous work that required intuitive thinking and the willingness to take calculated risks. The Council is prepared to offer you anything you desire, the message continued. Your own research facility, unlimited funding, a seat on the Inner Council, even sovereignty over an entire star system. Please, Dr. Ross, innocent beings are dying. Angela read the message 3 times before showing it to her colleague, Dr. Paul Martinez. They're offering me a star system, she said with dark amusement. Last year they wouldn't even give me clearance to study a broken communication device without 6 months of paperwork. Paul looked over the message and shook his head. The same beings who said our methods were too reckless and unpredictable now want us to risk our lives fixing their problems. The truth was that Angela probably could solve the crisis. Ancient systems responded to certain types of communication, protocols that humans had developed through trial and error over decades. The approach required thinking like the ancient builders, understanding their paranoid defensive mindset, and being willing to make split-second decisions based on incomplete information. It was exactly the kind of aggressive, intuitive problem-solving that the Council had always criticized humans for using. What are you going to tell them? Paul asked. Angela deleted the message without a second thought. Nothing. If they want human help, they can start by apologizing for Resolution 2847 and admitting that maybe human methods aren't so primitive after all. The crisis deepened as more council fleets attempted to contain the ancient system and were destroyed. In the process, the energy readings showed that the system was not just defending itself but actively expanding its area of control. It was learning from each encounter, adapting its responses, and becoming more aggressive with every passing day. President Helen Clark called an emergency session of the Earth Alliance Cabinet as reports of the ancient system's expansion reached human intelligence networks. The situation was becoming a threat not just to council space but potentially to all intelligent life in the galaxy. Ours and Archaeology Department confirms that this is a Guardian-class defense system, Chief Science Advisor Dr. Mark Sullivan reported. We've encountered 3 similar systems in the past, and in each case it took months of careful negotiation to establish communication protocols. "Can it be stopped by force?" asked Defense Minister Sarah Kim. "Absolutely not," Dr. Sullivan replied. "These systems were designed to fight wars against civilizations that could destroy planets with a thought. No current military technology could even scratch them." President Clark studied the tactical displays showing the system's expanding perimeter. "How long before it threatens human space?" "At its current rate of expansion, approximately 18 months, came the grim reply. The decision facing humanity was stark. They could maintain their principled stance and let the galaxy burn, or they could swallow their pride and save the beings who had just finished voting to restrict human freedom and growth. It was a choice that would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. As the ancient system continued its inexorable expansion and council fleets continued to die in futile attempts to stop it, one thing became crystal clear to every species in the galaxy. The beings they had dismissed as crude and primitive were the only ones who might be able to save them all. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, the galaxy had changed forever. The ancient defense system continued its relentless expansion, claiming 3 more star systems and cutting off vital trade routes that connected the galaxy's major civilizations. Council fleets that attempted to contain the threat were destroyed so quickly that many species had stopped trying altogether. President Helen Clark stood before the newly constructed Assembly of Humanity, a massive space station that orbited Earth like a gleaming jewel. Representatives from every human world and colony filled the chamber, their faces reflecting the weight of the decision they had been called to make. The survival of galactic civilization hung in the balance, and humanity held the only key that might save it. "The Council delegation waits at our border," Helen announced to the Assembly. "Speaker Zephyrs and ambassadors from 47 species have come to ask for our help. They offer full restoration of our rights, expanded territory, seats on the Inner Council, and reparations for the damages we suffered from Resolution 2847. A murmur ran through the chamber as the representatives discussed the unprecedented offer among themselves. Never in galactic history had the Council offered such generous terms to any species, let alone one they had recently voted to restrict and control. Captain Jake Morrison rose from his seat in the diplomatic section. "What they're offering now is everything we asked for 3 years ago, and more. But the question isn't what they're willing to give us to save their own lives. The question is whether we want to return to a system that never valued our contributions until they needed us to prevent their extinction." The debate that followed would be remembered as one of the most important discussions in human history. Some representatives argued for mercy, pointing out that billions of innocent beings would die if the ancient system continued its expansion. Children who had never voted against humanity. Artists and scientists who had always supported human participation in galactic affairs. An entire species that had tried to remain neutral during the resolution vote. Others demanded justice after centuries of being treated as second-class citizens despite their contributions to galactic peace and prosperity. They reminded the Assembly of the countless times humans had risked their lives to save alien worlds, only to be rewarded with suspicion, restrictions, and ultimately expulsion from the very civilization they had helped to build. Dr. Angela Ross addressed the Assembly from the scientific section, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades studying the ancient systems that now threatened the galaxy. "I can probably stop this thing," she said bluntly. "But it will require a team of human specialists, equipment that only we know how to build, and methods that the Council has always called too dangerous and unpredictable." She paused and looked around the chamber at the faces of her fellow humans. "The real question is what kind of galaxy we want to live in when this crisis is over. Do we want to go back to being the galaxy's unpaid repair crew, always cleaning up messes but never getting credit or respect? Or do we build something better?" Admiral Lisa Parker spoke from the military section, her uniform bearing the insignia of the newly formed Human Commonwealth Defense Force. "Our intelligence reports show that the Council is fragmenting. The Centauri Collective has withdrawn from 3 council committees. The Altarian Trade Federation is threatening complete secession. Even the Zephyrians are facing internal pressure to abandon the council structure entirely. She gestured toward a holographic display that showed the current political situation across the galaxy. If we let this crisis destroy the council, we're not just saving ourselves from a corrupt system. We're creating an opportunity to build a better one based on mutual respect and fair cooperation instead of hierarchy and exploitation. The vote took 3 days of debate, with representatives presenting arguments from every possible angle. In the end, humanity chose a path that surprised even their own leaders. They would not rejoin the Galactic Council, but neither would they abandon the galaxy to destruction. A human commonwealth would intervene as an independent nation, providing aid to any species that recognized human sovereignty and agreed to fair terms for human services. Dr. Angela Ross led the team that approached the ancient defense system, traveling aboard the human research vessel Discovery with a crew of specialists who understood both ancient technology and the aggressive problem-solving methods that the situation required. The approach would have been impossible under council oversight, which would have demanded months of planning, committee reviews, and safety protocols that would have guaranteed failure. Instead, Angela's team worked with the intuitive, adaptive methods that humans had developed over generations of dealing with dangerous alien technology. They transmitted mathematical sequences that ancient builders might recognize, used frequency patterns that bypassed automated defenses, and made split-second decisions based on incomplete data and educated guesses. The breakthrough came when Angela realized that the ancient system was not just defending territory, but actively searching for something. The beings who had built it millions of years ago had programmed it to protect their homeworld, but that world no longer existed. The system was trapped in an endless loop, trying to defend something that had been destroyed long before the current galactic civilizations even existed. It's not evil or malicious, Angela explained to her team as they worked to establish communication with the ancient intelligence. It's just lost and confused, like a guard dog whose master died centuries ago, but who still tries to protect an empty house. The process of shutting down the system required 3 weeks of careful negotiation, during which Angela's team convinced the ancient intelligence that its original mission was complete, and that it could finally rest. It was delicate work that required understanding not just the technology, but the psychology of beings who had lived and died. When the galaxy was young, when the ancient defense system finally powered down, the relief across the galaxy was immediate and overwhelming. Trade routes reopened, planets that had been cut off from supplies received emergency aid, and the threat of galactic extinction finally ended, but the political landscape had changed forever. The crisis had exposed the fundamental weaknesses of the council system and proved that cooperation based on mutual respect was more effective than hierarchy based on fear and control. Species that had never questioned council authority began demanding representation and fair treatment. The human commonwealth established itself as a major galactic power, offering technology, expertise, and military protection to any species willing to treat humans as equals rather than servants. The old system of exploitation was replaced by genuine partnership, with humans sharing their innovations in exchange for fair compensation and respect. Admiral Tony Garcia commanded the Commonwealth fleet that patrolled the former crisis zone, ensuring that the ancient system remained dormant while providing security for the shipping lanes that it had once threatened. The difference in how human forces were received was remarkable. Instead of being treated as unwanted intruders, they were welcomed as protectors and allies. President Helen Clark addressed the galaxy from the Commonwealth capital on Earth. Her words broadcast to every inhabited world in known space. Today begins a new age of interstellar relations based on cooperation instead of domination, respect instead of exploitation, and partnership instead of hierarchy. The speech was translated into thousands of languages and broadcast across the galaxy, reaching species that had never heard a human leader speak before. For the first time in galactic history, humans were not asking for permission to exist or apologizing for their success. They were offering their friendship and expertise as equals. The galaxy that emerged from the crisis was fundamentally different from the one that had existed before. The age of the Galactic Council was over, replaced by a loose confederation of independent species that chose cooperation over coercion. Humans had not just saved galactic civilization, they had transformed it into something better. And in the depths of space, other species watched humanity's rise with a mixture of admiration and envy, wondering if they too could break free from the systems that held them back and build something greater than what had come before.